name is Russen. I taught Intro to Contact Staff this morning on Saturday. I wanted to teach this class a little bit differently than I've been taught in the class because for many years as a student of the contact staff, I learned from many different teachers. The most important thing that I wanted to get across as a contact staff is all about the wrist and feeling the weight. To start off with this idea, everyone needs to be comfortable with balancing right over their wrist on the center point of the staff. Hopefully you should have this marked off of the tape. Go a little bit left, a little bit right, figure out how to make it just sit there for you. Once you have that comfortable, make sure you're doing it with both hands. You want to try to throw it a little bit, but instead of throwing it and letting it hit your wrist and make a big noise, try going up and down. This will really help you master the idea of how to keep the center point there. Up and down. Kind of like tossing it, but keeping your hand with it the whole time. Pay attention to this feeling here that you get when your hand goes up and lands with your staff. The pressure on the back of your wrist is something that you're going to have to keep track of the whole time as you start to do any type of move, because when your staff is in this horizontal position here, it is going to have the most friction between your wrist and the staff. And also, when pushing against it, you increase that friction again. So this bounce is extremely valuable. Go back to that later. So, the first thing, and the thing that you need to practice the most as somebody who wants to study contact staff, is the wrist wrap. To demonstrate, the wrist wrap is the analog of the front spin. So, if you study traditional staff, and you should, you have one hand over hand. Similar thing happens here, where one hand is crossing underneath the other one. But with contact, we're not using any fingers. So, it rolls over like this. To start off with this, I like to tell people to understand how the staff goes back and forth, and I like the pendulum exercise. So holding the staff like this, between your fingers, with a center point below it, maybe a good hand's breadth away, you want to really squish it back and forth there, and practice the staff going left and right, and pressing on either side of the staff with your hands to change the direction, to stop it, to move it. You can go a really large pendulum, almost where it flattens to your palms, but you want to feel what it's like to control the velocity of the staff. When everyone starts off doing wrist rolls, you'll spin really fast for a while and it'll get away from you. Or worse yet, you won't spin fast enough and it's always about to fall off your wrist. So figuring out how to speed up and slow down the staff is something that needs its own level of practice while completing the motion. So the basic contact staff starts off with here. Say you're going to roll the staff over your right hand. Let's start with grabbing here, and we'll take this one as a safety, just because I want to push it over the side. And go ahead and let it fall down. It's the basic idea. But instead of just letting it fall down, because that's the easy part, you want to roll it over and catch it in the other hand right on the other side. So just as you would with a drop spin, reach your hand underneath to grab this. With the contact wrist wrap, you want to wrap your hand over here and get it on the other side, ready as it's in motion. And this is where the pendulum comes in. Because already I'm pulling the staff from one side to the other. And the fact that I'm keeping the pressure on either sides of it allows me to control the direction of it. Go this way, that way. So that's one part of it, the squishing dimension. The other part of it is the pop. So as you start getting in motion, each like threading a hand behind here, it's going to start getting out of control, and you want to be able to hold on to it. Now, you need to make sure that, in general, that the center point is over your wrist, but specifically, you're always going to be doing it a little off to the side, because when you pull from one side, you're allowed to accelerate it. The other part of controlling the velocity is all about just the bounce. My hand is not going to just stay here, though you could do this, but the power comes from having it bounce in every time. Now, make sure your hands are not up here in front of you. You're going to tire your shoulders out that way. Lowest comfortable point for your wrists, however far they can bend. And every time, there's a little bit of a bounce, bounce, bounce. Start over again, bounce, bounce. bounce, 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 bounce. So this on its own, you could spend 20 hours a week practicing, and if you did for 2 weeks, a month, you're going to be able to have super slow wrist wraps or super fast wrist wraps, but you'll have full control over this and be able to use it anywhere in your spinning. Once you start to feel comfortable with this, I want to teach you a little bit about turning, because you don't really want to be stuck facing the audience one way. So the direction here is very important. If it is rotating this direction towards my face, if I was doing badly I would hit myself, we call this the backwards direction. So if it's going backwards towards my left side, I'm going to take my left hand and put it out to the side and turn with it. Or even not turn with it at first, just to push it to the side. So back to that rhythm, bounce, bounce, put the hand, bounce, bounce, on the bounce, and just push it off to the side and let it keep going. It doesn't require any of the effort. You may need to experiment with your wrist to figure out whether it needs to be very angled or very flat. But mostly, when it's on that bounce point, you have again that friction that I was talking about. You feel it a little bit, and that friction will allow you to pull it to the side and behind you while maintaining the plane. So the simple turn here is taking that, going with it, and going to the side. And this is a good way to practice it, because suddenly you're spinning the opposite direction, and now the right side is backwards. So you can just go back to the right, spin some more on your wrist, go back to the left, spin some more on your wrist, like so. So after you get here, you start to branch out a little bit. If you're just starting the wrist wrap, it's hard to do what we call a conveyor belt. But let me demonstrate for you. Going up on one elbow, it's the wrist wrap, there. You can do these semi-continuously, always catching to the side. And there's variations therein with a one beat in the center, where both hands go out into kind of a prayer motion. Depending on your style or what you're doing. But practicing this, thankfully, is a lot easier, because you don't have to do it all at once, you can do it into pieces. Starting over here, you want to bring it up like this, and just to illustrate the path that it takes, you put your elbow right in front of you, with your left hand grabbing your shoulder. The important thing is your elbow is directly in front of you, not to the side, or especially not off the body, but right in front of you. And that's going to take some flexibility and shoulder work to get it right all the time, but it'll be the most thing that'll mess people up, and definitely did me for the first year. So you're placing it on your shoulder, on your arm, with a center point in the middle, switch hands over here, and continue to rotate into the stop sign. This is the entire first half of the conveyor belt. You can go backwards, start over, but get familiar with where the staff should be. It's all about the timing and the rotation. First rotation goes this way, and so forth. So one rotation, second rotation, and it's done. So if it's going too fast, you're going to have to move your arm really quickly. So work on, the speed there. You can practice this on its own, going like this with a wrist wrap, putting it back here. If you can do it with a wrist wrap, it's really a matter of finding the bounce again. So bounce, bounce. On the second bounce, lift it up into my shoulder. And you can practice these all on their own, so you make sure whichever half is causing you the most problem can get the most attention. And just so it becomes natural and comfortable for a potential fire spin, excuse me. The second side starts over here on the other half of the stop sign. Again, with a safety. Easiest to grab on the other side with your hand up in the stop sign, and you're bringing this towards you, and your elbow is coming out just like it was on the other side, directly in front of you, not off to the side. And the staff should be landing right about here if you've done all your timing right. And it just comes off the other side. So this one definitely starts from a wrist wrap, though you can still practice it on its own. It's hard to get the velocity to spin it up from a dead stop. Though it can be done. Better, if you're getting comfortable with these, say, okay, I know where it is, I can feel it on the back of my wrist with the bounce. When you feel the second bounce, bring your elbow up, and what you're doing is you're pushing the staff up and towards you, pulling, excuse me, even like this, which is a really weird practice, but I discovered that this morning. But that's effectively what you're doing, but you're keeping your hand in place so it comes up towards you. And again, definitely practice these on their own. This is a really good drill. You know, do 20 of these. Make sure it's all really clean. No major mistakes. And if you can do like 20 of these without any mistakes on both sides, then you're more than ready to put the two together, because the joining piece is just the wrist wrap that we already covered. Up there, down side, back. Up here, dents together, back. Now that we covered the pieces, I'll show you again the variation, which was coming up, excuse me, coming up, both hands out, and then off to the side. If all of that makes sense to you and all of that was easy, you probably also learned some basic shoulder wraps. Going like this. The simplest way to practice shoulder wrap is holding off to the side and paying attention to the end point here. You want to grab a couple hand widths away, because you're going to place it with the end point, or the center point, behind your neck, off to the side, and lean with it and let it roll. It needs to have enough horizontal velocity to continue on, and then your shoulder does a little bit of a dip. In the beginning, you may be afraid of hitting your face, so go ahead and put your hand out and catch it, just so you get comfortable with the shoulder part. The arm roll is about having the dip down and having it roll down afterwards as it's going through a spin. You can practice the arm roll on its own too, though the arm roll for the is a little bit different. And that's where I stop with my half the class. Hopefully you get another half the teacher to go through Steve's or other advanced things. Thank you.